Let me tilt this a little bit further so we can see my Wheel in Space paperback.
Is it a hardback?
No, it's not a hardback, dear. It's a paperback.
Oh, how common. Hello guys, and welcome to another Talking About Who. And this week we are going to be looking at season 5. If you're new here, click like, click subscribe, and we want to hear your comments below about what your ratings for the different stories are. I'm Peeble, and today I'm, as ever, joined by...
Hello everyone, my name is James.
And hello everyone, my name's Jason. It was a very, very posh introduction today, James.
I know.
His mother brought him up properly, you see.
We could ask for no more. It's a great start when it all goes according to plan in the first minute.
Absolutely. I tell you what also is a good start to a season. That's Tomb of the Cybermen. How smooth
Great
is
link.
that?
Absolutely fantastic link there.
Gotta be honest.
That was incredible. Who wants to start on the Iceman from Hong Kong?
Tomb of the Cybermen. Okay, so probably used too often this word, but for me it is a classic story, and it was one of the first Troughton stories I ever saw. So that always sort of holds in my mind. The scene behind me, where the Cybermen come out of the sort of the tomb and they sort of defrost, is one of the sort of memorable cliffhangers in Doctor Who history for me. It's just that you know, and this episode, this story is brilliant. Love it. Lots and lots of things around it that I really enjoy. But yeah, it's very good.
Jason, you're a little bit senior to us. So had you read the novel before you saw the video?
I'll be honest, the novel drives the hell into me because it's got the wrong Cyberman on the front of it. So for that reason, I probably haven't read the novel as much as I should have done. But yes, I'm not old enough to remember the original broadcast, it's fair to say. But like James is saying, you know, classic is an often overused word. I'm certainly not going to get my jar of Marmite out for this story because I think it is a real good one. It was a blessing when this was returned from Hong Kong. That I do remember. I remember all the hype at the time when the episodes came back in 1991, which was great. But really, Maurice Barry plays a blinder here for me throughout this story. His direction, he just grabs the script and runs with it. And, you know, right from the opening scenes, you know, on the planet Teller surface, you know, all the way through, you know, the tombs are filmed on, you know, they're beautifully on film. You know, you've got a great supporting cast. You've got Pat, you've got Fraser, you've got Debs. What more do you want in a story than that?
I think the interesting thing is about Tomb, actually, whether it's true or not, but there is a theory that because Nation wouldn't allow the Dalek stories to be sold abroad, that Tomb was purposefully a launching point where if you hadn't seen the series before, you could start and you get the introduction, and you get that lovely film Tardis scene, don't you, with the echo and the sense of size and the sort of it's sort of a reintroduction to the series, isn't it? It's like if you don't know what's going on here, this is what's going on. You are now Victoria. I mean, talking of Victoria, got to go with Miss Watling there. It's incredible that given that they only sort of together for a couple of episodes during Evil, because there's a lot of sort of captured, not in the same scenes together and all that sort of stuff. This is the first time they're properly together, and they are straight on that. The dynamic and the chemistry, it's brilliant, and it is there from the get-go. There's no sort of building up to it.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
You know, you're right about this season being almost like a bit of a refresh start because it goes in a completely different direction. So if you take the first 4 seasons, you know, and this is where you've got, of course, it's classed as the monster season, and you know, it goes to a slightly different level. Without doubt, the best of the 3 seasons that came out of Troughton's era. You know, Fraser and Pat already well established from a point of view of, you know, they've gone through season 4. When Debs joins the team, just again, you're right, it just gets right from the outset, you can see where this is going to go, and the relationship builds slowly through the first couple of episodes, but by the time, you know, and you see her learning and you see her growing a little bit in this story as you go through, but the character absolutely suited the TARDIS team at the time, and for me this becomes the definitive TARDIS team of the 60s.
There's a wonderful moment at the beginning with the
60s. Sorry. We'll come back to that, Bryce. Go on, James.
I was going to say, there's a wonderful moment at the beginning, isn't there, that you see used as a GIF quite often, which is where the tomb doors have opened, and you've got the Doctor and Jamie sort of almost holding hands, sort of skipping in, and you've got her sort of standing there going, "Hang on a second." You know, the relationship, like you say, develops through the story. Initially, she's sort of quite nervous and sort of like, I don't want to go in, but she's particularly her relationship with Jamie in this story, when they're sort of alone together or they're going off venturing together. I think it works really, really well, and her interaction with some of the other characters as well. You know, the what's her name? Kaftan, that's it, yeah, and Klieg. You know, these two people that are conspiring against everybody, and she kind of stands her own towards the end. She's kind of like, oh, I'm not, you know, not really taking any more of this, and you know, stands her ground. So I think, like you say, as an introduction, it works really well, and it doesn't feel that it disrupts the TARDIS team. It makes it feel like it is more cohesive.
I think essentially the whole Ben, Polly, Jamie thing doesn't quite work, because Ben and Polly are a unit, and Jamie then sort of just has a bit of Polly's lines, a bit of Ben's lines, and it doesn't quite mix. And I suppose once Victoria's there, he's like the older brother to her, so there's someone to look after. There's a dynamic that works, because it's not just having the leftover lines or halving Ben's part. So it's time, I think, that Fraser sort of comes into his own as well. I mean, the hand holding is a proper Pat and Fraser's bit of business, isn't it? That's not going to be in the script. They've done that on the day and sort of just got away with it. But yeah, great supporting cast. I mean, the funny thing for me, I think, about Tomb is that the Cybermen have branded everything. I like the fact that they're cold, illogical, emotion-free creatures, but they've got their branding. They're like, you know, it's like the Nike tick. They put their little cyber logo all over the shop, haven't they? Just let everyone know.
It is a bit like, I wonder whose tomb this could be, and it's got this giant cyber face on the outside. Yeah,
a little bit of stenciling on their tombs as well, just for when they come out the cling film, just so they know.
Yeah.
Slightly, I mean, again, I don't want to pick too hard at a plot. It is an odd sort of scenario that they've disappeared from the universe and hidden themselves to recharge in a tomb, to only be opened by humans if they're found. Is it just that they're meant to be clever enough to become Cybermen? Yeah. But then do you have to be clever to become a Cyberman when it's all been holed out?
It's a bit of a weird one, because in this story, so you've got that premise, and the doors are electrified, and that's quite a bold opening. As when someone goes over and touches the door and then dies, and you're kind of like, oh. But in this story, that they have to be intelligent in order to sort of unlock all the puzzles and work it all out. And the Doctor's like, oh, I don't think we should do this, and then starts giving the answers. He's sort of like, all the way along, he's like, oh, I don't think we should open this tomb, but here's the key. It's almost like he's like genuinely curious, but doesn't want to be, proactive in saying, oh, well, I can solve this in 2 seconds. He kind of gives clues away, and then suddenly the tomb's open and the Cybermen are coming out, and he's like, oh, I better stop this then. It's a bit weird, that premise, that they weren't necessarily smart enough to open it on their own. the Doctor had to help them. But that's my nitpick point on this story. Is I understand the premise that they had to be smart and logical in order to get into the tombs, and that would make them perfect Cybermen. And you've got the cult as well, haven't you? The logicians, I think that's what it's called, that are looking for the Cybermen to be their sort of natural partners because they believe in pure logic. So that all ties in. It's just that initial bit of, oh, they need a bit of help to get through the little puzzles before they can get into the tombs.
I mean, as Cyberman plans go, this season there is a more complicated Cyberman plan on the way. A slightly longer Cyberman plan, if it must be said. But how do we think about the costumes, how they look? Because they've had another sort of slight, they're not a massive redesign from the last one, but they've got a bit more PVC, I think, haven't they, than the moon base?
They're a little bit more blingy, I think, than the moon base.
A little bit more blingy.
A little bit more blingy, I think. Just getting a bit Welsh there for you. I like this design for the Cybermen. My favourites will always be 10th Planet, so there's nothing ever gonna surpass the 10th Planet design. But I would say that the tomb design is probably my second favourite of the Cybermen designs overall, I would say.
And I swear someone has just taken. Do you remember those like airflow balls that you had when you were at school? Sort of the plastic one with loads of holes in it they used to throw and would not damage you if you got hit by it. I'm sure someone has sprayed them silver and stuck them on the hands of the Cybermen. When you look at them, that's what it looks like.
I think our cat used to have something like that to play with as well. Yeah.
I think the only oddity in this story for me, and the whole Cybermen ethos, is the cyber controller. And I'm just, again, I'm not entirely convinced that this race would need somebody to be the cyber controller. They could pretty much just do this themselves.
But who would give the orders? How would they know what they were doing that week? If they were all in charge?
Oh, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. No, but it's almost like, oh, we need a new type of Cyberman, so we'll create a cyber controller and he's going to be bigger and better and make all the decisions with the big brain. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. Do you need a cyber controller? Or are they
he looks great though, doesn't he? I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't always work, the effect with the light in the head and all that. But I mean, he looks great. So it's a nice piece of design. And the great moment, obviously, I love the bit where he kills Kaftan. That's a cracking shot with the smoke. It's the full horror. I mean, the horror elements are actually quite subtle in some ways. I mean, obviously, normally a cliffhanger is, I'm going to kill you, exterminate, whatever. But there is the "you belong to us, you'll be like us." That's
great line.
About as dark as it goes.
No, it's a great line, extremely well delivered. In fact, the whole of the sort of the scenes with the tombs opening, I mean, they're epic in their approach, aren't they?
Big shout out! Sorry, just say gutted that Bernard Holly goes after one episode. Just going to put that out there.
The way that they are shot, they are epic. I mean, I love the music that goes with it. There's a real sense of, foreboding about what happens. I think I slightly get disappointed when they refreeze them and then unfreeze them. It's like it's just a little switch on the on the panel, like defrosting your freezer, and then like quick freeze. But that moment when they start emerging, that to me, like I say, it's one of my most memorable moments of Doctor Who, is that scene. So I love that. And when the cyber controller is fighting with Toberman, again, he's huge bloke and tackling the Cybermen. Normally you wouldn't see that kind of physical contact going on with the Cybermen, because they're normally much more powerful and they crush people or kill them straight away. So I think there's some real elements in there. Like you say, the horror is more subtle. I mean, the point where the Cyberman gun comes out and kills, in the practice room, that kind of thing. It's not full-on horror. It's not sort of like ghastly death. It's always an accident sort of thing.
You see the burn marks, don't you, from where he's been electrocuted in the opening as well. I mean, 5 o'clock in 1967, you can sort of see why Mary Whitehouse got the gunships out, can't you? Really, this isn't the magic roundabout. This is quite harsh. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of great. I don't think there is a bad performance in it. I mean, even there's a couple of fluffs which I think everyone sort of just gets away with in it. Interestingly, I'd sort of say, does it benefit us a lot more that this is back and you can see it? Because were it not the case, say it's 1990, you'd have the soundtrack and you'd have the imagery, but you wouldn't have those moments, because a lot of the impact on Tomb, I think, is the visuals. Kaftan getting killed, great to see if you saw a telesnap or something, but the writhing, the smoke, so much of Tomb, I think, is visual.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a massive benefit that actually we are watching this properly rather than a recon or an animation or just stills?
I mean, I think it comes up, it's quite prevalent for the season that we're going to talk about today, but I think, you know, when you think, and we'll come to Enemy of the World later on, but yeah, I agree. I think this is one that needed to be seen to understand it. I mean, when this came back in 91, or was released in 91.
Released in 92, Clifford.
It was 92, was it? Oh, there we go. I'm sure.
Viewers will write in if we don't clarify.
Well, I'm trying to de-age myself, I think. That's probably what it is. But up until that point, you know, I'd seen a handful of Troughtons, I'd seen the Crotons, I'd seen the Dominators, you know, and it's kind of like this story was something, was always built up to be something really, really special, something completely different. It was talked about amongst fan circles as being, you know, the classic of all classics. And the chance, I think, to get to see it and for it to have come back, I think it really did deliver to the expectations of what we all thought it would be like, I think. But you're right, we miss a lot by not having a lot of these stories. So, you know, telesnaps don't quite cut it for me.
No.
You know, the animations, they're great for the purpose that they're there for, you know, obviously, because it allows some visual storytelling. But I think unless you see the actual episodes, and as I said, we'll talk about it in Enemy of the World, but unless you actually see the episodes, I don't think you really understand a lot of what's going on.
So, at pains to not make this 7 hours for the season, are we happy to go for a vote on? The other thing and it's such a curious thing to be excited by. I love the fact that the end music feels like they keep just knocking the needle back on the record. It just keeps coming back to the start of it, and it's really scratchily mixed. I love that, and I don't quite know why. So, James, do you have a score for the Tomb of the Cybermen?
I do have a score for the Tomb of Cybermen, and it is 9.5. 9.5.
I honestly thought you were going to say 0.75, then I was going to laugh. Okay, Jason, what is your score for Doctor Who and the Tomb of the Cybermen? I
mean, I really thought long and hard about this score, and I am with James on this one. I wanted desperately to give it a 10 because it really is a perceived classic, and it's one that I really like, but it's not quite there. It's 9.5 for me.
9.5. Well, I think you're both mean old queens. It's never too early for a 10 from Shirley. I love Tomb of the Cybermen. I would watch it. I'd watch it as one of my stories of choice. I know there's a lot of, you know, lot of burnt bits around the edges, whatever, but I love it. It's one of my favorites. So 10 from me, because I'm kind.
I'm loving this early 10. I really am brave to give an early 10. First story of the season. We're out the blocks. It's a 10.
It'll be a whole season of 10s ahead of us.
I think it is. I think we're going to have 10, 10, 10 right across the board.
Well, as neither of you have given a 10, that's not going to be very likely, is it?
Oh, I beg your pardon. We have a 10 on the Demons.
Demons isn't in this season, Clifford. Demons isn't in this season. Anyway.
We'll see.
as we head to the green grass of home for you, Jason, and up a hill in Wales, it's the Abominable Snowmen. So
Absolutely.
Jason, do you want to kick us off on thoughts about Yeti?
Absolutely. Mysterious happenings in 1930s Tibet that was really Snowdonia, but great idea to take the story and film it out on location in kind of a real grand location in the way that it was. It adds a real dimension to the episode that we can see, because this is the start of a bit of a dry spot now, because we don't have the actual live episodes. And this is another, we'll probably talk about this as we go through it, but we've got one episode that we can actually see and follow, but there are some great positives in this one. You've got the character Travers, you've got the great intelligence introduced, you've got a really intelligent script actually by Haseman and Lincoln. I think it's really good, solid story. If I've got any particular criticisms about this particular one, the Yeti are far too cuddly to be monsters. That's all I'm saying. Far too cuddly to be monsters, but good, solid story. A little long at 6, but I'm sure we'll say that a few times during this season.
When you say it's a little bit long at 6, we only have one. You know that, don't you?
But I've sat through the recons, and it's a little bit long at 6. You know what? This one is absolutely crying out for animation, as any of the missing stories are. But I'd love to see this one. Because I'm not a lover of telesnaps, I much prefer the sort of visual animation feel for any of these missing stories. So, for me, this is one that I'd love to see back, love to see the return of this story. But, I think, if all I had was an animation, it would be great. But I like it, and I like the telesnaps to a degree, but I do think that the story itself feels a little long.
I'd sort of say I disagree with you on the Yeti costume. I much prefer the first one to the beaky ones that come back later. There's something a bit more. I think they look a bit more like an actual creature. I think the light up eyes and the beak that comes with the next incarnation, I'm sort of a bit. I'm not sure I dig that as much.
And they actually bill that one as being scarier than the first one, don't they? When there was an advert that went out that said, the Yeti are back and they're more scary than ever. Maybe.
I mean, there's a possibility that I'm not a big fan of this. And this story does nothing really for me. I've tried lots of times with the audio, because quite often at work, because much of the season was missing when I was at work, I would listen to the different soundtracks in order. And I'd find I would quite often just go out and do something else and come back in, and the Abominable Snowmen would still be going. Days later, it would still be going. And again, it's an unfair thing, and yes, there's recons and all that. Is it unfair to judge it on a soundtrack? But that's sort of all we've got. It does feel like it's a stretch. I mean, I think if we had the first episode instead of the second one, there's a lot more to take from the attack on Travers in the tent, the Tardis landing, Jamie the Sword. There's a lot more going on. Episode 2 is a bit kind of like it's that kind of stepping stone to things happening later. I think if we had episode 5, it'd probably be better, because things happen a bit more. There's a bit more the attack, the fighting, Padma Sambafar. There's a lot more to take from it. It does feel like it's a sort of bridging part, and it's a bit harsh to have to judge that as the visual. But having said that, I'm not a fan of the novel. I'm not a fan of. It does nothing for me as a story. Am I harsh?
See, I like the idea of the great intelligence, and this for me is like the season of callbacks, because you've got the Cybermen, and spoilers, you get them again later. You've got the great intelligence. We will talk about later on. So you get this sort of. It's not very often that happens in a Doctor Who season. You will get returning monsters that come back once a season, but you don't necessarily get 2 that come back. Both come back in the same season, although this is a long season. So I like that idea. I like the idea that they're bold enough to say, here's a brand new sort of alien force. And it's not just going to be the once that you see it. We've got a continuation of that story a bit later on, and obviously the Great Intelligence has survived into New Who, if you like, in different guise. But it's really difficult for me to sort of judge this because I haven't listened to the recordings, so I haven't had that experience. I've seen the one episode. You're right, it's not a defining episode. It's not an episode where something dramatic happens. It's kind of like, we've gone from here, now you have to sit through this to get to something else, and part of me is mildly curious as to what happens next, but based on just episode 2, I wasn't that eager to run out and go and buy the audio for the rest of the story.
One of the nice things about the story, actually, and I know these things create diverse universes and awful fiction, but it's nice that there's a story that the Doctor's been there before, and it's not something that you've got to know it's just one of those lovely things where it's like, when I was last here, and you can make your own sort of background up to it. And I love those sort of little nods when you get a hint of something, which has probably been plugged 12 times since. But it's a nice sort of feel to a story, I think. So Abominable, I appreciate it's a Marmite story.
Oh,
but do we have any scores, do you think, for that now?
Excuse me, I'm not getting the Marmite out for this story because it doesn't deserve to be out for this story. I think you're being a little harsh on it.
What's so good about the Abominable Snowmen then?
I love all the bits in the monastery. I mean, there's some really good drama that's built up. I mean, it is latter episode stuff, admittedly, but there's more to this than just cuddly Yeti running around a hillside. The Great Intelligence is established in this story. I think it's a good set piece for Doctor Who. It's not a classic. It's not solid quite, but it's not the worst story by a long way. And I think there's more to it. And I wish this is another one that I wish was back that I could see, because actually I think this is one of those where if we saw some of the later episodes, we may reevaluate what this story looks like.
Yeah, I think the visuals would add a lot to it. I mean, sort of Jack's performance as well, because having seen how he does Web of Fear, there's a lot of what he's doing that he's not on audio for. Patrick's performance is about 90% visual, I think, against audio. It's just, there's a lot of riffing this season, which is nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of riffing on the base Under Siege, or and given that formula and how it's done better, even by the same authors later, it just sort of feels like it's a lot of running up and down a hill, some slightly beige people in a monastery, and then one scary villain that's whispering. And they all knock the pyramid over and go home, and it's fine. It doesn't quite cut it, and I wish I liked it more. I honestly do, which is why it's Marmite. Remember the Marmite?
Everyone's allowed to bring their Marmite out for a story or two, for sure. I've done it, as you know, a number of times already. It's not just coming out. For me, it's not coming out this story.
Okay, so, well, if you're not getting your Marmite out, are you going to get your score out, Jason?
I will indeed get my score out for this one. As I've said, not a classic. Just under a solid story for me. I wish I had the visuals. I think I could properly give it an evaluation, but based on having sat through the telesnaps and the audio and the surviving episode, and having read the book, and this is one of the targets I do enjoy, I'm going to give this a very healthy 7.5.
I thought you were going to give yourself a score, having gone through all of that.
Well,
I'm going to give myself a 10. I'm going to give the story.
I made it through several times.
No, I would never do that, James.
We can't do negatives, can we?
Oh no! Now look, we've been here before with these really low scores, and we.
No, I meant for you, not the Abominable Snowman.
Oh, I love you too. Right.
James, rescue us. What's your score?
So my score, unfortunately, is based on what limited knowledge I have of this story and what I've seen. So it is a slightly, not quite abominable 6.
6.
Mm.
Okay. The scores on the doors from P. Balban. 5 will make you get up.
Yeah.
5 is what it is. It's 6 episodes. So I've knocked 1 episode's point off. The formula is broken, Jason. So that gives.
What you've done, you've subtracted the 1 for the one that exists, and you've gone for a point per missing episode.
That could very well be the formula, which gives Abominable Snowmen 18 and a half.
I think that's awfully low for this story. I really do.
Well, you should have scored it higher then.
If you can go out and find the rest of it, Jason, for us, and then we'll rescore it.
I'll give my mate Phil a ring. I'm sure he could find it for me.
Everyone up to Wigan and we'll watch the rest of it.
Well, I'm sure he'd invite us round this summer to have a watch on it.
One story that we can watch, though, or at least 2/3 of it, is Doctor Who and the Ice Warriors.
Mm.
Literally. I don't think I've been able to hit that since I was 11, and even then it would have been pulled. So the Ice Warriors, James, do you want to kick us off with the Ice Warriors?
But you've just touched on one of my highlights, which is the soundtrack. It's really distinctive when you start watching it and the titles come up. I quite liked that. Then it goes a little bit downhill for me. So the story is. I like the story. I watched this again last week, and I watched the telesnap version, and I really struggle with telesnap episodes. Part of my brain just seems to switch off completely. I just don't. I find it really difficult. And so when I was watching the Ice Warriors, I was okay. I was enjoying it. There's a great cast in this. You've got Peter Sallis. You've got Bernard Bresslaw. You've got Roy Skelton. Sort of household names in sort of in the story. However, I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's the telesnaps that put me off, or whether or not I just feel that 6 episodes is too long for this story. There seems to be a lot of running down ice corridors and then avalanches and then running down another ice corridor and another avalanche. And I could be being unfair, but I felt it could have been a bit shorter.
Jason, are you troubled by the length?
For this one occasion, yes, I am. And I have to say that it's a terribly ploddy story. And it really needed to be 4. It stretched to 6, and it's definitely too many. So great 4-parter. I think this would have zipped along. I think you've got Bernie Bresslaw, who I think brings a characterization to the Ice Warriors. For me, this is the first story. It's probably the favorite Ice Warriors story of all of them that I've got. You've mentioned it already, James, a great cast. You've got almost dystopian civilization feeling to it, because it seems like Earth, but it's Earth under siege to a degree, because you've got the Ice Age, and it just feels like the advanced civilization of Earth had gone backwards rather than forwards. I think it's kind of it. I think the Ice Warriors are great. It's a great concept. I think they add something to the story, but I think it's not. How can I say it? I think the story just lacks. I think the monsters work well. The story lacks slightly.
I mean, there's an awful lot of, shall we use the ionizer? Don't use the ionizer. Should we use the ionizer? What would the computer say? The computer's configuring a Windows update. It doesn't want to answer. It's like, oh my God, just use the freaking ionizer and we can all go home. It doesn't feel tense, because it's like, shall we? Well, the computer says that. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's that proper 60s thing of we're scared that computers are going to introduce Twitter to the world and make us all horrible people. But it's kind of it is sort of caught up in that, and again we've got the base under siege thing, and Ice Warriors are great. I disagree with you that it's the best Ice Warrior story. You know, I'd arm wrestle you on that one, but
I think people would pay money for that.
Well, we'll do that on the Patreon then. That can be a separate video.
We'll do it as a special exclusive at Utopia.
Exactly, live on stage.
Yeah.
I love the design. The Ice Warriors look incredible. I love the design for the Peter Barkworth and Wendy Gifford. They have a lovely look, and I do like the juxtaposition of the sort of old house that they're in. Obviously, it's probably a slight budget thing that they're not going full futuristic, but I like that vibe of it being an old house that's got the new tech in it, and that's great. The TARDIS landing sideways, that's a great fun thing in the first episode, and then climbing out.
It's not sideways in episode 6, and I wonder why.
Because it's erected itself with all the glacier movement. It's just gone up. God, you're not following it, are you? It shook itself upright.
No, I got lost somewhere in episode 3.
It's to me, it's a little bit like the Reign of Terror. I'm thankful there are 2 missing, because it doesn't make it a worse story. I don't mind that there are only 4 episodes of the Ice Warriors. It's one of those things that I slightly I get enraged when people do episodes I'd most like to see returned, and they're like, episodes 2 and 3 of the Ice Warriors. It's like, we've got 4 of it. Pick the smugglers, pick something we can't see. We've got quite a lot of example of this story. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't have the other 2 episodes back. Lovely to have a complete thing. But it's interesting that when you do watch like the VHS version, where there's like a mini recon, you don't lose an awful lot between episodes. I mean, it'd been nice, I suppose, to have seen the defrosted, Ice Warrior sort of coming and taking Victoria away. That's a nice bit. But we get enough, Ice Warrior and Victoria sort of marauding action during the whole thing. But I mean, the design, lovely design, the height difference there, and because all the cast are all sort of about 5 foot, aren't they? And the Ice Warriors look massive. I mean, they look huge.
What do you think of the casting of Bernard Bresslaw, though, as an Ice Warrior? I mean, he's really hidden behind the costume. He brings characterization to that part, but what do you think about having such a big name actor behind the mask?
John, what? Do you know what? It's interesting, because I think in terms of film names, obviously, because he was a huge sort of carry-on name, wasn't he, at the time? Doctor Who's punching some weight here, because Peter Barkworth and Jack Watling, I mean, both of them big names into. I mean, these things are sort of slightly lost as time goes on, aren't they? But they were huge names for it. For instance, I'm not going to name names here, but Miss Watling said her father's royalty on the DVD release of Web of Fear was more than her royalty on both of them together. That's sort of proportional levels of how much Jack was getting in there. He was a big name, and it was a big thing to have in Doctor Who. So Peter Barkworth, big name to have in there. Incredible. And Bernard he did a lot of serious stuff later. I mean, he did a lot of his Shaka Spear and the like. So he wasn't necessarily a comedy performance, and it'd be very easy to play it that way. I think you go, I've got the latex on, I've got the helmet, I'm a Martian man. Shall I piss about? And it's kudos to actually no, he doesn't. He plays that as a character.
We talk.
But he has the physical presence, though, doesn't he? He's a bit like Roy Stewart as Toberman. He's really tall, well built, and so it fits that, the idea of an Ice Warrior and the size of them really well.
In our season 26 chat, we talk about stunt casting with the names that they were bringing into Doctor Who in those sort of later seasons. In some respects, it's the early equivalent of it, but I would never have classed any of these castings as stunt in any way, shape, or form.
No, I mean, Dev's always told the story that actually she just went home and told her dad, "Look, we want to get a part in this show. You come and do it." And he's like, "All right then." So that was how he ended up doing it. But obviously, he was good friends with Peter Barkworth. So I suppose it's that sort of thing of setting your benchmark. Once one person's gone, "Oh, I'd love to do that," then it becomes thing. Because actually, as we go on, Mary Peach was big film star before she gets to Doctor Who. So it's kudos to the show that it's actually able to get people in. But I suppose they're playing characters that they wouldn't necessarily be playing in a straight drama, aren't they? There's a little bit of fun to be had. Do we have any other thoughts on the Ice Warriors? The silence is golden.
I saw this on the big screen at the BFI, and it was my first introduction to the story, and it's better on the big screen.
Were you asleep though?
No, I was very much awake, because how would you sleep with that awful opening music? Because quite frankly, James, I don't know where you're coming from on that, because that's an god-awful.
I just think it's really, I just think it's really atmospheric, and it's very different, and it, something needs to grab your attention, and the music does.
You must love the Space Pirates. That must be gold for you.
I mean, I'm a lover of the gunfighters, so
Yeah, we digress. James, shall we come to you for a score on the Ice Warriors?
Okay, so for me, I've put the Ice Warriors down as 6.5.
6.5. Jason, even?
Yes, the Ice Warriors for me, there was no calculation I could work out or try and plan for. It's going to be a simple 6 for me.
6. Okay, well, I think ironically, in the opening, Jamie says, "Oh God, we haven't landed further up the hill, have we?" He says the line a bit like that, and for me, it sort of encompasses that. I don't hate it; it's just not something I'd rush to put on. So for me, as with the Abominable Snowmen, it's a 5.
This is the monster season we're talking about here, and we've had 2 5s from you.
2 5s and 1 10. So I've still done a bigger score. If this was averaging out, if this was a circle, I'd be winning this.
Well, I'll have to make up for it for the latter half of this then.
Well, that gives the Ice Warriors a total score of 17.5.
Oh, is that in last place now?
It is in last place.
Good grief.
Ooh.
It's about right, I think, so far. I think it's about right so far.
Haters are going to hate, but who could possibly hate Doctor Who and the enemy of the world?
I did. When we only had 1 episode of it, this is the one I would bring my Marmite out for. Episode 3 of Enemy of the World, right? My Marmite would have sat fairly and squarely on the desk all the way through, because episode 3 was pretty much almost unwatchable by itself. Then all of a sudden, Phil brings home the bacon, and back comes the missing 5 to make it a glorious 6. And this story was an unbelievable revelation. If ever you want justification that a missing story would have a lot of additional stuff that you would see when you see the episode for the first time. We talked about it with Abominable Snowmen, but in this one particularly, this story became almost an overnight classic, because it's actually a real, proper, good Doctor Who story. And you'd never have told it from the 1 episode that we had. Absolutely glorious. You've got Troughton at his best with, playing the 2 roles. You've got Mary Peach, who I think's amazing. And you've just got a really good old-fashioned, proper good story that goes all a bit James Bondish at the end and a bit sort of underworld, but it's fantastic. It's a fantastic rom. Even from the bit of business at the beginning of the episode where Troughton sort of says he wants to go into the water, all the way through to the fight scene at the end in the Tardis. It's a bloody classic.
James, were you
just do scores now, shall we?
Were you a fan before the visuals came back?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No. And this is an episode, actually, I agree with Jason. This does benefit from being able to actually watch it. The Troughton in this, to me, is brilliant. I love, who doesn't like a bit of Troughton and Troughton action as it was? He sort of, his the way he adapts the, you know, the voice, even the facial expression as well when he's playing Salamander. I just think that's really cleverly and well done. You know, if you read a script and it said, right, you're going to play a villain and the hero, there's a chance that it could be really badly done or completely over the top. And I just think that the way that he does it is quite subtle. The voice is very good, and you know, at the bit at the end where he sort of staggers into the TARDIS and sort of like says, oh, you know, trying to sort of get Jamie to operate the controls, and then you realise that actually it's not the Doctor. You know, even when he's playing Salamander playing the Doctor, you can see the difference. I just think there's something brilliant in his portrayal. And going back to what you said earlier, Paul, a lot of his performance is visual. And his body language, his facial expression change between this, you know, between the two characters, and I find it fascinating, and I love watching that. And if we didn't have this story, I don't think you would ever be able to pick that up on, you know, just on an audio or just on a on Telesnap. So I think that would be missing. That being said, I've got the 6-episode feeling on this one. I think there's a lot going on, and I love the fact that the companions go off and they've got their own sort of mission, and he goes off and he's got his mission. There's a lot of double crossing, a lot of backstabbing, and a lot of, you know, are you who you say you are, etc. To the point where I don't think it would be a 4-episode, because I think there's too much for it to be in a 4-episode. I think it just could have been tightened on a few bits and pieces.
Oddly, it's the episode that we had. So it was episode 3. So if you take episodes 1 and 2 and the rest of the story, they're perfectly paced. It's episode 3, which is like the filler episode almost in this 6-parter. And but now I can see its place within the overall dynamic of the story. It's actually the right point. It's that little bit of light relief that you need after the sort of seriousness at the start, and then the more serious as it gets when you head into the underground bits towards the end. I know, I think this one's got the right pace. This is a proper 6-parter.
It does move on from it. It's not sort of like the Ice Warriors, where it is just that same control room, and the Ice Warriors same control room. I think because it's trying to do the James Bond thing, obviously on a £50 budget, it does go around the world, and there is a sense that things have sort of progressed. I mean, actually, and people always say these things retrogressively, but I honestly, when I used to in the office listen to the soundtracks, I loved Enemy of the World, and I loved it before we had it back. And when people say, which one would you like back, I was like, I'd love to see Enemy of the World. I'd love to see the Faceless ones. They're two that I think would, but I mean, Faceless ones we've not got, but I mean, Enemy of the World, visuals, everyone loves it now. I think they slightly love it more than the next story we're about to talk about. But don't you shake your head at me, Jason, or I'll waggle my marmite.
I'm locking my marmite up for the next story.
I think Enemy of the World, episode 3 is probably the weakest side. It is essentially, you know, someone being guarded in a corridor because they don't want to build a cell set, and it might infringe on them being rescued or shot. And there are a few strange leaps. I mean, Victoria and Jamie all of a sudden have got sort of special agent powers. They've slightly had a character transformation, which then disappears the week after. They don't act very Jamie and Victoria, I guess, during it. But it does contain one of my all-time favorite Doctor Who actor performances, and Carmen Munro, I think, is stunning. I think there's such a salt and a power to her performance, and yeah, it's a shame she gets shot in episode 4, but it is an incredible performance, and I think yeah, that's one of the things that helps make this a standout. Milton John, love. He is the nastiest piece of work in this. I mean, when we did the commentary, Carmen kept calling him the Snake, and that is true, isn't it? He has got such a quality in that hairdo. Everything is horrible. Bill Kerr. I mean, we're still on guest star, Mary Peach, Bill. These are big people at the time.
This was the last story that went out under Sidney Newman, didn't it? This was the last one where he was the head of drama. And it does feel like a sense of occasion. It does feel like you say, it's a Bond film, but it's not got the budget of a Bond film. There are the elements like all of these people underground who think there's been this war. And what I find about this whole season actually is there are elements of the stories in this season that you then see replicated later on in other seasons in later Doctor Who. So like the ice melting and the Cybermen emerging in the tomb, you get in Earthshock, where they start punching their way out of plastic bags. Initially, it's not as dramatic. This one, you've got people who are hidden away because they think that the world has gone into war. Invasion of the Dinosaurs. You've got these people who think they're on a moon base or whatever it is, and you've got these elements that I think are repeated later on that are borrowed from this season. So there's lots of good things, and this is don't get me wrong, this is a good story.
I mean, it must be an eternal sadness that Colin and Mary from the Underground didn't get their own spin-off. I mean, that was a soap opera waiting to be done, wasn't it?
I think I know who you could write to ask for that spin-off to happen.
I shall tweet tonight. I'm sure a recast can be arranged. So no monsters though. Is that? I mean, we're in the monster era. It's the monster season. Does this stick out like a sore thumb because there is nothing vaguely monstrous in here in terms of an actual, not a person?
I would have said so before I'd seen it. Now I've seen it. I've actually never sat and thought, actually, I call this the monster season, but there's not a monster in this one. I don't think it needs it because there's so much going on. I think the monster almost could be classed as Ramon Salamander here, actually.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the people around him.
And the people around, yeah. Benek. And I mean, Barry Letts always said that it was a really bad story, and I suspect he was judging it from memory and the episode that exists. But if you look at the opening, I mean, some of the stuff on the beach, the helicopter stuff, that shot when it goes up across the beach, it's like, crikey. And again, you can't get that even from the telesnaps that we had. You don't get that semblance of quite what it's going for. I mean, side note here, I mean, obviously we always associate this now with it coming back. I think that's the big association for everyone. It is that announcement. They're like, here it is. Did you watch it all in one go, or did you try and eke it out and savor it?
No,
I watched this all in one go.
Yeah, all in one go for me as well, without doubt. It had to be watched that way. I was so eager for the return of some new Doctor Who, new old Doctor Who. I just wanted to see what it was going to be like. You look at the Target book cover for this one, and the Target book cover for this one is pretty dire. It doesn't tell you anything about the story. It suited episode 3. Now, the story, the story that we had and the story that came back just had to be consumed almost episode by episode, almost straight away.
We were very controlled and watched it over a period of time.
Very traditional way of watching Doctor Who, apparently, that.
Not we didn't watch it weekly. It wasn't quite. We didn't take the full 3 months to watch the 2 stories. Strangely, and it's such a personal anecdote, I remember reading in year 5 the novelization of Enemy of the World, and my English teacher had a thing every week. She'd ask us what we were reading and ask us to review it. Mrs. Blake was a bitch. I'm not going to lie to you. She wasn't very nice. And I told her I've been reading Doctor Who in the World. She went, Doctor Who, that's not real. That's not real. That's not a real book. I don't want to hear about it. And I said, it's what I've been reading. It's what I've been enjoying. And I'm going to tell you about it. Because even in year 5, I was not going to take that crap.
Bring it on.
Where is she now?
where is she now? She's writing New Adventures with Big Finish. No, she's not. She's not really. She's not really.
We'll have to put a disclaimer up after this episode, I'm sure.
Hey, look at it this way. I mean, it hasn't harmed Russell T Davies reading Target books, has it? Do you know what I mean? So I think that sort of awful thing that I think, especially in that era of when it was, I suspect nowadays people wouldn't be so bothered, but in that era, that sort of snobbishness about what you should or shouldn't read, and enjoy what you want to enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on from Mrs. Blake, who I hope is no relation to Gerald Blake, because otherwise I've done for the Abominable Snowmen, and I've done for her as well. Have we got any scores for the Enemy of the World? Jason?
I have indeed got a score for the Enemy of the World. And all things considered, I think I've said very, very positive things about this particular story. It's great. Proper classic, but still not going to get a 10, I'm afraid. I've gone for a very, very respectable 9.
9. James, where are you at on the Enemy of the World?
So I also really enjoy this. Slightly could be shortened, but I gave it 8.5.
8.5. Drum roll. Oh, I love the tension. I'm going to give it 9. I do love the Enemy of the World.
Very fair score.
9 is where I'm at on that, which gives it 26.5.
Not bad. Not bad at all, considering the last couple of stories.
Kept it into second place so far then.
That is in second place so far. As we head for a short break, because we're going to split this into 2. So if you've enjoyed that, or even if you haven't enjoyed that, come back for part 2 of our season 5 review.
It's like the cliffhanger from Enemy of the World. Jason might be sucked into the vortex by the time we get back. Jason
is being sucked as we speak, and he's clinging to the console.
And hopefully that's going to get cut out. We'll see you back in the second half.
Bye-bye.
Bye.